Glancing at the Brooklyn Nets record, 17-8, first in the Eastern Conference, it'd be easy to say the Nets are well on their way to scooping up the 2022 NBA championship. And perhaps they might be. But Brooklyn's performance against fellow contenders has been concerning. The Nets are just 7-7 against above 500 teams, and the losses against the Phoenix Suns and Golden State Warriors epitomize Brooklyn's struggles against the elites. In this video, I took a look at where Brooklyn fell short against two teams widely regarded as the cream of the crop in the NBA. But first, please do subscribe below if you haven't already. Now let's get into it. James Harden has been a bit of a wild card this season, to put it lightly. On one night, he'll look fantastic. The next, not so much. He's put up averages of 22.6 points on good splits in wins, but just 17.3 points in losses. His performance against Golden State and Phoenix were perfect examples of that. Against Golden State, he was aggressive, getting downhill at will, and recording 21 drives against the Warriors, well above his season average. And even in a down year, Harden's recorded more isolation possessions than anyone, with dazzling efficiency. The dude was feeling himself so much, he even split a hedge like the Harden of old. A hedge, by the way, is where the big man defender, Kevon Looney, jumps to the level of the screen while the guard tries to recover. That said, we did get a glimpse of his physical limitations against Golden State. While his first step looks sharp in this clip, it's the third through fifth steps where a defender can make up some ground. Granted, Harden scores here. And when a big man was involved, Harden couldn't really turn the corner against him and picked up his dribble, thereby stalling out the possession. Which brings us to his performance against Phoenix, where Harden struggled. Against the Suns, Harden was unable to attack the retreating big after pick and rolls. A big reason he's putting up his worst pick and roll ball handling efficiency since Synergy Statistics started tracking this sort of a thing. Here, with DeAndre Ayton in a drop coverage, Harden looks to force the switch after LaMarcus Aldridge sets the screen, instead of just attacking Ayton in space. Mikal Bridges recovers, and the Nets end up with whatever this is. I personally found it troubling to see Harden fail to create any sort of separation against DeAndre Ayton, a guy he cooked last year during his 38-point comeback on the road. Brooklyn's spacing only made matters worse. Having DeAndre Bembry and James Johnson on the floor basically gives Mikal Bridges the opportunity to play free safety and wall off the rim from James Harden. And here, DeAndre Bembry and LaMarcus Aldridge both make rim runs instead of leaking out to the corners, basically giving Harden no other options but to kick out against a packed paint, which gets picked off by Mikal Bridges. This was maybe the worst instance of bad spacing. Look at the lineup that James Harden is sharing the floor with. Patty Mills, James Johnson, Javon Carter, and Paul Millsap, only one of whom strikes any sort of fear into an opponent when loading up from deep. And unsurprisingly, Chris Paul and Cam Johnson, to a degree, pretty much ignore whatever is going on the weak side. Landry Shamet stunts aggressively off of Javon Carter to take away Harden's driving lane, and JaVale McGee is playing such aggressive drop coverage against Paul Millsap that he's basically in the stands. Against Brooklyn's poor spacing, the Suns played in the gaps to take away Harden's driving lanes, like CP3 does here by sagging off DeAndre Bembry. The strategy really threw Harden off. All in all, against Phoenix, it was the perfect medley for what has plagued Harden this year. Bad spacing, a lack of aggressiveness, combined with a decline in burst. Simply put, the Nets need more consistency from Harden game to game. The Nets spent much of their offseason searching high and low for defense and rebounding, as Sean Marks put it, building out a platoon of bigs. And while they may be better suited to taking on the Milwaukee Bucks of the world with all that added size, as we learned from Phoenix and Golden State, teams with elite pick and roll guards can absolutely cook Brooklyn's defense. Blake Griffin is out of the rotation completely, but he stood no chance against Stephen Curry. Against Golden State, Brooklyn made the decision to switch pick and rolls to take away windows of opportunity for Stephen Curry. And so Curry responded by doing this to poor Blake. Paul Millsap, a similar athlete to Blake at this point in his career, didn't fare much better against the Suns. The dude just doesn't have the speed to fare well as a switch big. He gets blown by here by Devin Booker, which pulls in the help from Cam Thomas, opening up the skip pass to Landry Shamet in the corner. But maybe most troubling of all was LaMarcus Aldridge's performance against the elites. Aldridge has been one of Brooklyn's most productive players this season, yet he was basically played off the floor against Phoenix and Golden State because of his defensive issues. A huge red flag for his playoff viability. Golden State put Aldridge in action early with dribble handoffs. And while Aldridge is normally a drop coverage guy due to his mobility issues, the Nets used him as a switch big out of fear of Stephen Curry's three-point marksmanship, which didn't go that well. Against the Suns, it was even worse. Because Chris Paul and Devin Booker are such good pull-up shooters, especially against drop coverage, the Nets yet again chose to switch with LaMarcus Aldridge to take away those opportunities. But switching didn't go well either. Aldridge just isn't quick enough to keep up with a guy of Devin Booker's ilk in space. Speaking of that, check out Phoenix's spacing. It's night and day compared to Brooklyn. Chris Paul was surgical in finding the 36-year-old in transition and having DeAndre Ayton screen to force the switch. It didn't help that Brooklyn's defenders, especially Kevin Durant and James Harden, were soft switching and not making much of an effort to fight over screens. And with this in mind, the Suns put both Durant and Harden in action with sets like Double Drag, which feature these two transition screens, knowing that neither Durant nor Harden would fight over a pick, giving Booker the eventual switch with Aldridge. And here's that same Double Drag set again. The Nets don't fight over any screens, and the results are very similar. That said, the Nets did everything they could to hide LaMarcus Aldridge to keep him out there, even having Aldridge hedge ball screens by jumping out at Jordan Poole while DeAndre Bembry tried to recover, but Poole was able to turn the corner on Aldridge. So that also didn't work. Overall, Phoenix's backcourt shot a combined 9 of 12 when defended by Aldridge, and if LaMarcus is a no-go when it matters because of defensive issues, well, that's a big issue. He's one of the few players on this roster that can capably space the floor, and he's really consistent offensively. Granted, it wasn't all bad. The Nets may have stumbled on their small ball switch everything 5 during the mini comeback against the Phoenix Suns. James Johnson is a guy that can press someone like Chris Paul full court and allow the Nets to keep the ball up front. And he might be the best roller on the team with plus size and better athleticism than any of Brooklyn's bigs. And I'm starting to wonder if Johnson is Brooklyn's best shot at staying in games against teams with elite initiators. Brooklyn's defense has been mostly solid this year, ranking 11th at the time of this recording. But if there is one thing I can quibble with, it's been their performance when defending slips to the basket. Because the Nets switch most of their off-ball screens, Golden State simply had their screeners slip and roll to the basket early to catch the Nets off guard while trying to communicate swaps on the go. Bruce Brown, in particular, was put through the ringer, already tasked with dealing with the atomic force that is Stephen Curry. Brown also had to worry about Warrior screeners of all shapes and sizes slipping to the rim after screening for Curry. And here, Kevon Looney slips his screen for Stephen Curry right before the Nets are able to switch, thus resulting in free throws. Golden State even got funky with it by using Curry as the slipping screener, which really had Brooklyn and Bruce Brown especially seeing ghosts. And as a second counter, Golden State would then go back to Curry as a screener, yet instead of having Curry slip to the rim like before, it was Wiggins who went to the cup off Curry's screen. The Suns also targeted Brooklyn's defense, but in different ways, setting low screens to get Brooklyn to switch, thereby putting Kevin Durant on the high side of JaVale McGee on this lob. Same idea, Booker comes off a low pin down from DeAndre Ayton, the Nets switch late, and Ayton has the advantage on DeAndre Bembry when rolling to the basket. We have to give the Nets credit, Brooklyn has greatly improved its overall defense from last season, but it still has room for improvement on the margins, on slips and hard rolls to the basket. And I think it's a big reason why the Nets have struggled thus far against elite offenses. The best of the West gave the Brooklyn Nets a wake-up call, as it stands, the Nets are not good enough to win an NBA championship. And while that may sound harsh, the Nets need more consistency out of James Harden. Their spacing must improve, either with different lineup optimization, some moves, or maybe a little bit of both. Brooklyn needs to settle in on a consistent big man rotation with schemes that make sense. I brought up James Johnson at the 5 in spurts as a good option for teams like Golden State and Phoenix with elite initiators. And then overall, the Nets just need to clean up the edges defensively. If all of these things can happen, I do believe the Nets can grab their first NBA title. But with that, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and go ahead and share this on Twitter and Reddit. If you enjoy my stuff, give me a follow on Twitter. I just picked up a new gig with basketballnews.com that I'm really excited about, and I'll be sharing all of my stuff from basketballnews.com and everywhere else on my Twitter. So follow. Go ahead and check out my Brooklyn Nets podcast, The Clear Out, brought to you by Blue Wire Podcast. Subscribe and give me a 5-star rating. And then I have a Patreon as well that functions as a tip deck to keep me afloat this year. But that's pretty much everything I've got today. I know there's a lot to plug. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace!